Corey Lewandowski sitting down with us today. We're live in our studio here at Lewandowski headquarters. Corey, thanks for being with us. And as you know, Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign manager for Donald J. Trump for president, and now he is with the Vice President's Political Action Committee, which is the hard money political action committee that is raising money to give directly to candidates that share the president's America First agenda. He's a senior advisor to the Great America Committee PAC. More information, go to greatamericacommittee.com. That's Great America Committee. Let's get right to it. Yesterday, in what I think is stunning news, to continue to bolster the economy, and another promise kept, the president renegotiating NAFTA with Mexico in a stunning deal. Everybody said it couldn't be done, to bring our jobs back, get our wages up. He renegotiated with Robert Lighthizer the entire trade deal. Now Canada is on the outside looking in. Their Prime Minister Trudeau, the president, says he's going to call him today, but he says, look, if I can't bring them to the table, I'll just go forward with Mexico. What do you think?
John, this is exactly what the president talked about on the campaign trail, which was for too long, for 30 years, the United States was entering into these multilateral deals where the other countries would gang up against the United States. We would end up on the short end of the stick. And the president said, if I'm elected, I'm going to do bilateral deals, one-on-one, the United States and one other country. He talked about renegotiating NAFTA on the campaign. He's now followed through with that. Bob Lighthizer at the U.S. Trade Representative, Jared Kushner from inside the White House, worked this for almost 2 years to get it done. And what we saw yesterday was a promise made, promise kept. The stock market was up 250 points because of this deal. The president said, look, this is not just a good deal for the United States, but it's a good deal for Mexico, because now, for the first time, we're going to see car manufacturing having parts that are made here in this country to come back into this country, which means more jobs, more manufacturing, exactly what he pledged. And this is a win for everybody. Promise made, promise kept. Thank you, Donald Trump.
So, absolutely no front page news on it today. It
Shocking,
brings
John.
jobs
Shocking.
back. I mean, what is the deal with the fake newsers out there? I mean, look, I get the bias against Trump. I get what they're trying to do, but this is just good for America. Why can't you even present this just in an honest and upfront way?
Because the media doesn't want to give this president the credit he deserves. If this was Donald Trump's only piece of success in the first 18 or 19 months of his administration, it would be enough that the Republicans deserve to be put back in office because he needs a partner. But it isn't. You think of the massive tax cuts. You think of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, who hopefully Kavanaugh will be on the Supreme Court. You think of when he renegotiated U.S. hostages overseas and brought them home. You think of American remains coming back from Korea. You think of what he's done to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. I can go on and on and on and on and on. No credit. It is a news cycle. It is a news system, which is not only an obstructionist news system, they're an obstacle to the president. The only thing, my guess, is if I turned on one of the major media outlets today, they'd be talking about Michael Cohen. They'd be talking about his attorney is a liar, in case you haven't seen that story, Lanny Davis, who was a source for CNN, right? They will talk about anything that is negative to the president. They'll talk about how he didn't go on and praise John McCain enough. And as you know, John, he put out a statement immediately off of his Twitter account praising John McCain for his service and recognizing his family after the death of Senator McCain. But that's not what the media is going to talk. They want to talk about every negative story. They don't want to talk about what Donald Trump did yesterday. He put the president of Mexico on the telephone in the Oval Office with the media in the room. And did you hear what the president said? I'd like to give you a hug. That's what he said. Thank you, Donald Trump, for renegotiating. This is good for Mexico. Nobody wants to cover that because they hate this president.
Right. They don't want to find any positive in it, and it's good for America. And look, I mean, the alternative for Mexico was tariffs, and they were going to get nothing, right? So this is what brought them to the table. The president did a magnificent job in negotiating this, and now he's got Canada in a position where Pierre Trudeau has to step up. Let's get to Lanny Davis. I don't think I've ever seen this from a lawyer before. He makes a statement which he says he misrepresented the facts or something. He walks his statement back that basically the president knew about this meeting with his son with the Russian lawyer. He sets up a GoFundMe page, raises a couple $100,000 off it, walks it back. Now he's saying, well, maybe there wasn't a meeting. Lanny Davis positioned this as if Cohen was going to run into Mueller's office the day he took the plea and he had all the stuff on the president. He doesn't have anything, because if he did, he wouldn't be going to jail. He would have just gotten immunity or done a trick. What is going on here?
Yeah, John, it's amazing. This guy is as much of a liar as his client Michael Cohen is, right? This is the same guy in Michael Cohen who said Donald Trump had nothing to do with the payment. I made the payment on my own. I'm the one who committed bank fraud. I'm the one who committed tax fraud. And only after Michael Cohen was facing 63 years in a federal penitentiary did he then try and implicate the president in a crime which the president had nothing to do with. But Lanny Davis, his attorney, has changed his story as often as Michael Cohen has. First, we find out Lanny says he had nothing to do with the story that CNN reported with Carl Bernstein and others. And now, because he was called out, he calls the Daily Beast of all publications, the Daily Beast, which is not exactly a first-tier publication when it comes to media. And he called and he said, well, I guess now that you've caught me, I have to admit, yes, I was an anonymous source for that story, and yes, I made mistakes, and yes, I have to walk it back. I mean, it's amazing how many times people just can't tell the truth. If he just told the truth the first time, neither he nor his client would be in the problems that we are today. But what happens is they try to lie, they try to cover it up, and they do anything they can to conceal the truth from people, and this is going to come back to haunt them.
And CNN ran with it.
Of course they ran with it. Look, that's what CNN does. They go with unverified stories sometimes. We've seen it when it came to Anthony Scaramucci, where they had to issue an apology to the mooch. We've seen it so many times, right? And look, I like some of the people at CNN. Some of the people there are friends of mine, and I think there was a time where they tried to be honest brokers of the media. We know that MSNBC is so far to the left. You know, that's the extension of the Nancy Pelosi channel. And we know that by and large, the people who watch Fox News are the Trump supporters because they want the truth. And CNN used to be that source of information that was down the middle that people could go to, but they've gone so far to the left that they are no longer reporting the news. They're now making the news, and that's not what they're supposed to be doing.
So Lanny Davis has to walk back the anonymous source thing he did that was not true, so he lied about that. He's raising money off GoFundMe to pay himself, which you just find to be odd. Guess they can do what they want with that. But now we get to the point we are where CNN and other networks are saying Trump is going to get impeached over this, and it's only the tip of the iceberg, and they've got Cohen. Now they give immunity to the Trump organization's long-term CFO. What are they after here? What are they going after now? Because obviously if they're giving immunity to the CFO of the Trump organization, we're not talking about Russian collusion, right? We're talking about business situations. Yeah, what's their end game?
You know, John, it's amazing because when the Mueller investigation was stood up almost 2 years ago now to investigate the potential of Russia collusion, that was done under the guise that some outside entity tried to materially impact the outcome of a U.S. election. And I've said it 1,000 times, it bears saying again. If anybody tried to impact the outcome of a U.S. election, I hope those people go to jail for the rest of their lives. But where we are now is financial crimes that the Mueller team has investigated under Michael Cohen, who had nothing to do with the campaign, to his wire fraud, his bank fraud, his tax evasion, his banking violations, right? And they gave immunity to the long-term CFO of the Trump organization, so very likely he could testify to the fact that Michael Cohen created false invoices, that he was paid by the corporation for invoices which Michael created that had nothing to do with the campaign. And I know Alan Weisselberg, he's a very good, very honorable man. I am certain Alan didn't do anything illegal. I'm sure, to the best of my knowledge, what would have happened is an invoice came across Mr. Weisselberg's desk. He saw it was from Michael Cohen. He paid that invoice. And when he paid that invoice, in the eyes, potentially, of some of the investigators, they said a crime was committed. But there's no crime committed. Alan Weisselberg, as the CFO, pays invoices. That's what he does. It was Michael Cohen who committed the crime by perpetrating a false invoice for things which he should not have been reimbursed for, potentially. That's what the issue is. So, look, the end game is no longer about Russia collusion, okay? What we need to see is we need to see Bruce Orr in front of Congress. We need the president to declassify the 302 investigation memoirs that the FBI took from Bruce Orr, those dozen. We need the president to declassify a dozen to 24 pages of reports that the Justice Department has so that we can see what the American people already know. The Pfizer applications were a fraud. The investigation into Trump, into potential Russia collusion, is a hoax. And the only campaign that we know unequivocally tried to get influence from Russia to impact the outcome of the election was a Hillary Clinton campaign. There's not been one prosecution. There has not been one indictment. There has not been one person who has been brought in, to the best of my knowledge, from a House or a Senate committee to answer to those charges. And the Justice Department has failed on that front, and we deserve better.
Why doesn't Jeff Sessions just name a special prosecutor like Rob Rosenstein did with Robert Mueller to investigate that whole thing that you laid out, including the uranium sale, the $500,000 speech that Bill Clinton got, former President Clinton, after the uranium deal went down, the billions of dollars that got donated to the Clinton Foundation, and the $125 million that got donated to it after the uranium deal? Why don't we get a special prosecutor on that?
Well, why doesn't Jeff Sessions just do his job? He's not recused from investigating the Clinton cabal. He's not recused from investigating any election improprieties from the Clinton campaign. Jeff Sessions is not recused from looking at the 33,000 emails that, after Hillary Clinton received a subpoena from Congress, were bleached and acid washed to get rid of. He's not recused from any of those things. He's not recused from investigating the so-called meeting on the tarmac between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton to talk about their grandchildren and golf, which we know is not the case. Jeff Sessions is not recused from any of those things. And what we have not seen from this Justice Department, from anybody top to bottom, is going after the people who we know either, quote, took out an insurance policy, the Andrew McCabe's, Jim Comey's, Peter Schrock, Lisa Page's, Bruce Orr's of the world, the Clappers, the Brennans. None of them have been looked at from the Justice Department yet, regardless of the fact that the IG report had recommended criminal liability to the deputy director of the FBI for lying under oath on 3 occasions. The Justice Department still hasn't prosecuted that case. I don't understand it. It's been months and months and months. Moreover, why aren't we looking at what the Clintons did during that campaign? The collusion that they had with a British spy, $5 million they funneled to a lawsuit, to a law firm, to go and get that false dossier, which was the premise for the FISA application that was signed off on originally by Sally Yates at the Justice Department and ultimately by Rod Rosenstein over there. Why has nobody looked into it? Because the entire premise, the entire false FISA application was built on a dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign, that was given information by Bruce Orr's wife, Nellie, who was an employee of Fusion GPS, who gave the information to Bruce Orr, who was the number 4 person at the Justice Department. Not some low-level grundoon, not some jamoke who's cleaning the floors on nights and weekends. The number 4 person at the Justice Department was getting this information. The FBI interviewed him a dozen times. And by the way, John, that guy still works at the Justice Department. That is a failure of our government to act swiftly, and we deserve better.
And he's still getting paid. So that gets us back to Jeff Sessions, Attorney General. You're frustrated. The president is frustrated. You can tell by his tweets. Why not just fire him? I mean, it's in the president's purview to say, look, I need somebody else that's going to lead this department in a different way. He's got that opportunity. Why doesn't he just go ahead and do that? It's not going to affect the Russia investigation because that's been recused, and why not just get rid of him?
Well, I'll tell you, John, I travel the country a lot. I was in South Carolina last night helping Congressman Jeff Duncan with his reelection effort, and I hear it everywhere I go. Why doesn't Jeff Sessions either quit, or why doesn't the president fire him? And I'll tell you why. If the president were to fire Jeff Sessions today, you know who takes over the Justice Department? Rod Rosenstein, right? And Rod, I think, would be worse as the Attorney General. And look, my guess is now I'm going to end up in front of some investigator for saying these things. Welcome to freedom of the press, right? And look, I get it. I take it. I got broad shoulders. There will be a time where I think Jeff Sessions understands the disservice on this particular issue he is doing to the country, and Jeff is going to decide on his own accord to leave. When that is, I don't know. But right now, with 10 weeks to go today to the midterm elections, I think we're 70 days from
70
the
days
election
out.
today, right? I don't believe it's the right time to get rid of Jeff Sessions. I don't believe it's the right time to get rid of Rod Rosenstein. I want to see the Mueller investigation wrapped up, the report submitted to the Department of Justice, and the American people should have a chance to review that before we get any closer to these elections.
So you want this thing to wrap up, and you want Robert Mueller to write his report, send it to Congress, and let the chips fall where they may.
I think it's the right thing to do. Look, we've spent tens of millions of dollars on this investigation. We know unequivocally, and Rod Rosenstein could probably swear to this, as could everybody else, there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians to impact the outcome of the election. That didn't happen. Does that not mean that people who either worked for Trump or 10 years prior didn't file their taxes? Sure, and they're now held accountable for that. Paul Manafort's held accountable for it. Michael Cohen didn't file his taxes.
Rick Gates.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you something. File your taxes. Pay your bills. You don't end up like this. Stop lying to investigators. Don't lie to the FBI when they come to your door. Be open and honest and transparent, and guess what? You're not going to go to jail. But when you don't file your taxes and you lie to the FBI and you hide money and you keep money in offshore bank accounts, bad things happen to bad people. But that's not what the investigation is supposed to be about. There was no collusion. There was no coordination. There was no cooperation between the Trump campaign and anything to do with Russia. So end the investigation into that. And if you want to look at other things, you can do so. But the American people deserve and demand the opportunity to, for once and for all, the government needs to prove and say that there was no collusion, because that's what we all know.
Today's rumor, and I don't know if you heard anything about this, you want to address it, but today's rumor is that the Mueller plan is to squeeze the children. And somebody was saying earlier that look for a coming indictment for Donald Trump Jr., and that the way that Mueller was going to get at the president was by putting undue pressure on his children. True or false?
Look, this is one of the fallacies that crazy Roger Stone comes up with, right? And these are the lunatics who follow Roger Stone. Where, you know, I'm driving on Sunday and I look, and all of a sudden Roger Stone's saying there are reporters at my house and I'm about to be drawn out of here in handcuffs. Not true. You know, he's another serial liar. It's amazing how these guys continue to survive. This is one of those false rumors that Roger Stone is saying that Donald Trump Jr. is going to be indicted. There's absolutely no truth to that whatsoever. And if there was any truth to it, the last guy on the planet who would know about it is Roger Stone, because don't forget, this is the guy who went on to say, I had an amazing meeting with Assange. And then when the FBI came to him, he says, well, it's not actually what I said I did. It's actually what I did. You know, another guy who's just a serial liar who wants to, you know, perpetuate himself as an important player, a guy I fired from the campaign. Look, John, this seems to be...
You fired him in 2 weeks, right?
It's amazing, like... You know, I'm not Nostradamus, but I guess I'm a pretty street smart guy. Every time I come into these clowns, right, I fire them, and they keep appearing. Sam Nunberg, Roger Stone, Michael Cohen. I mean, you can't get rid of them. They're like bad pennies that keep showing up. But they keep finding their way into the media because they say salacious, unfounded things. And the crazies in the media pick them up and say, Roger Stone has said that Donald Trump Jr. is going to be indicted. There is no basis for that type of conversation. And again, it is a disservice to the American people when people in the media report that.
So the legacy media picks it up because that's a story they would like to see happen. So the legacy media gives Stone credibility where he has none.
That's exactly right, because, look, I see it, you know, MSNBC puts Roger Stone on. Sam Nunberg, who I think was accused of being intoxicated on CNN, or at least under some type of medical care, you know, says crazy things on television. Everybody says this guy may not be fully sound, but they keep putting him back on because these people have a way of saying things that are so salacious it keeps them relevant, and that's what gives that legacy media that you talk about the opportunity to write a headline, which is completely false, but that's what they want to do because that's how they want to go after the president.
70 days, can the Republicans hold the House?
Well, today's a big day. We've got elections in Florida and Arizona. Let me just give my unsolicited plug for Ron DeSantis. I think he's going to be the next governor of Florida. I'd love to see Rick Scott become the next U.S. senator from there. His election is today. We've got a competitive race in Arizona. But as we stand here today, John, the generic ballot is about 7.5 in favor of the Democrats, which means we're literally at 1 or 2 seats difference. I think the Republicans are going to have a narrower majority, but if things stay the way they are today, and the Dow and the NASDAQ keep just crushing it where they are, right? The Dow's back over 26,000, the NASDAQ over 8,000 for the first time in history. You are voting for economic security. African Americans are going to turn out in record numbers to support this president and the candidates that support him. If that happens on Election Day, the Republicans keep the House with a much, much smaller majority.
And new senator from Arizona, the Governor Ducey, says he's not going to make a decision until next week out of respect to John McCain and his family. I think that's a very wise move for the governor. But several people named. One name that I hadn't heard, I just am shocked by it, is former state treasurer Jeff DeWitt, who was one of the first Trump supporters of anybody that was elected to a statewide office. He's now in Washington as CFO for NASA, for NASA, and he's been elected treasurer there 2 times. Great guy. Why isn't he in the mix?
Well, Jeff should absolutely be somebody that Governor Ducey considers. He's a former statewide office holder, and if you want to appoint a person, and it's clearly up to the governor, but if you want to appoint a person that is on the Trump-Pence agenda of making America great again, there is no better person from the state of Arizona than former treasurer and now current CFO of NASA, Jeff DeWitt. You know, I got to know Jeff very early in the campaign. He was a steadfast supporter. This is a man who came to Trump Tower at his own cost, at the cost of leaving his family, and volunteered 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week at the end of the campaign to help the campaign run efficiently from a monetary side, to make sure that things were done properly. This is a man who left his family in Arizona and came to New York to make sure he did everything possible to help Donald Trump get elected. He was endorsing Donald Trump when nobody else would as a statewide office holder, the first statewide office holder to do it. And as Governor Ducey looks to fill that vacancy, if, like I think Governor Ducey will, he wants to find somebody who's on the Trump-Pence agenda that's going to come to Washington and be an ardent supporter of this president to move our country in the right direction, I would love if the governor would consider Jeff DeWitt. I think he's a phenomenal choice and someone who I know would represent the people of Arizona well.
All right, Jeff DeWitt, Corey's choice for senator from the great state of Arizona. Corey Lewandowski, big day today, 70 days out. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it.